To begin with, we've updated our .loop templates for those who use .loop, but do eventually. The files are still there. You have the printouts with you. So I understand that some people still use Transaction Desk or Form Simplicity. That's all right. Take copious notes. Make sure that you're using the same documents that we're going to be going over today.
Oh, wow.
So when you go and create a new seller loop or new buyer loop, this is what you're going to see. I added a couple of loops last night just to make sure everything was coming across okay. And when you start your loop and you do a seller loop template, this is what you're going to see now. So you're going to see all the new NAR forms right at the top. And then all the other folders that we've always had in here for supporting documentation, things of that sort. And certainly once you're in your loop and you're starting to fill out all your forms and you've got a good handle on things, you can rearrange your form your .loop so it makes more sense to you. In this particular case, we wanted to highlight, at least for the next couple of months.
Thank you so much. Perfect timing.
Make sure everyone is, you're all on mute, please. Thank you. So when you get your .loop right now, you're going to see all your pertinent forms right at the top to make sure that you've got all your forms necessary that would be applicable to this particular application. So for a seller, you're going to see your new NAR forms at top, and then you're going to see the standard maritime business disclosures, the comprehensive disclosures, and the other items that we would normally have in a seller's loop, most used for homes that we're selling. So let's dive right in. We will get to the buyer one. There's probably going to be a lot more conversation around that anyway. So let's get into our brand new right of sale listing agreement. I'm not going to autofill. You're not going to see a lot of differences up at the top, page 1. Your time frame and legal description, property, all of that's pretty much the same. One of the bigger changes, if you have an old listing handy, you're going to see that this line 37 and 38 are probably going to be different because now it's just that seller expense, seller will pay mortgage discount, other closing costs or concessions. Now that's always been there, but it's been in a percentage, and you could still calculate whatever percentage that the seller might be able or willing to pay. But if the seller's willing to pay, in this particular instance, you would put the concession here. Now, I don't know a lot of agents that have used it. Basically, it comes into negotiation anyway, and somewhere down the line, a buyer makes a decent offer, but needs a few points to help them with the closing costs and prepaids, and that's negotiated. If you put it here, it just means that you can place it as an incentive already right up front for a listing. Any questions? Okay. Broker authority, seller obligations, broker obligations, most of that is the same. You'll notice the footer. The footer here is different. The parties acknowledge this form should not be used to share offers of compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. In other words, you're not going to send copies of this form to show people that, hey, you know, this is what we've agreed to. That's not. This is a contract between you and your seller only. You don't share this. You don't even have to share it with title, and you won't need to. We have a separate form for that. All right. So here we're talking about Section 8. They've changed some of the verbiage up here. You're going to see more compensation. Matter of fact, all of the forms have replaced the word commission with either fee or compensation. So there's a little bit different rewording up here, but it's basically the same, and you put in your percentage. What we put in here we'll cover in just a second, because I want to show you sections 9 and 10. And I know we kind of roughly went over this about a week or so ago. I've dug in deeper and got more information so we can get more detailed here. Basically, Section 9 is a notice. It's just letting everybody know that everything is negotiable. Section 9. The buyer's broker, even if compensated by the seller or broker, will. Now, please understand in this particular instance, in this contract, seller is seller, broker is the listing agent. So this is between you and you, the listing agent, and your seller. So seller or broker, that's you, will provide services for the buyer. Seller is advised and is aware that seller may, but is not required to, compensate a buyer's broker upon closing. Seller may choose to enter into a separate written agreement to pay buyer's broker, or may approve broker to pay buyer's broker in accordance with paragraph 10 below. Seller also understands that A, buyer's broker may include this broker. In other words, you're the listing agent or a listing broker. You may actually be the one bringing the buyer. The broker also works with the buyer in the transaction. So it covers that. 9B, if this occurs during the duration of this listing, broker will be entitled to the compensation in paragraph 8 for services performed for the seller, as well as the buyer's broker compensation in 10A specifically. We'll cover that. For services performed for the buyer, seller should therefore take this into consideration when negotiating compensation. And item C, receive separate compensation from the buyer for services rendered to buyer's broker. So in a particular instance where you have a buyer-broker agreement paying 3%, the seller's offering 2% to the buyer's broker, you may enforce it, but the buyer would be obligated to pay you the extra point. And that's clear to the seller. Broker may receive, listing agent may receive separate compensation from the buyer for services rendered to the buyer. Okay. What does that all mean? Well, let's narrow it down. The old way of doing this, where we would charge 4, 5, 6%, and then we would split that. So we're charging the customer, we've agreed to 6%, and I want to offer 3% of that to whoever's bringing the buyer. In that particular instance, you would put 6% up here in A, B, and C. And then you would select A. So select box A if you're splitting your 6%. Seller authorizes broker to offer compensation. The seller is authorizing you to offer compensation to the buyer's broker in the amount of. So if you put 6% in A, you would put 3% of the purchase price, or a flat amount, whatever that happens to be. This amount would be paid from the broker, that's you, me, technically, to the buyer's broker from the compensation amount mentioned in paragraph 8. It's paid from the amount that you put in paragraph 8.
Yeah, explain one more time. I'm lost.
Okay.
Start over again. 6%.
You put 6% in section 8A.
8A. Okay.
Right here. You're going to put 6% in here.
Okay.
The old way of doing it, we would split that. So I'm going to put 3% here. And then here I would put not applicable. So if you were to do this as an amount, you would put, let's say the seller's paying you $10,000, do whatever you want with it. Then you would put $10,000 here, and then you might put $5,000 here with an NA here. So these are and this is just like it was in the beginning, or, a month ago. So you would check this box. What this is saying is I'm taking this 6% and I'm taking 3% of that. This amount will be paid from the broker's buyer, the broker to buyer's broker, broker to broker. Understand that. And it's from the compensation amount agreed to in paragraph 8 above. Everybody clear? Everybody online clear? Mind you, online, if you raise your hand, I'm not seeing you. So go ahead and unmute, speak, and then remute. All right. Everybody's clear on that. Okay, what about the new way? I had a question today. So I'm talking to my seller and he's telling me, look, I'm going to pay you 2%. That's it. Awesome. You're going to pay me 2%. That's what I'm putting here, 2%. That's my plan B. I'm going to put 2% here. Then the conversation is going to lead to, that's fine. What about the buyer broker? Well, I don't want to pay anything. Well, let's talk about that. We're going to have a whole conversation with our seller to explain why the value of a buyer broker, how there's 60,000+ agents right now, members of the MLS that are actively looking for properties. And, they're going to call me and ask me if we're offering anything because they got a buyer might be interested in my home. I'm going to say, no, we're not offering anything. And they're just going to politely say, thank you, and move on. Whether you agree or disagree with that, that's what's coming down the line. In this particular instance, if we're not going to offer anything, which would be, number C, then it will just go live. And if somebody happens to click on it passively through, their own research on Realtor.com or Zillow, one of those, then, they'll reach out and contact me, and we'll hope for the best. But if you happen to convince them the value of a buyer broker and the fact that they're going to work with that buyer, pre-qualify that buyer, help them through their escrow and planning their, inspections and all of the things that they're going to be doing to reduce your risk, by the way, Mr. Seller, it might be worth offering them something. Great. You know what? You're right. I'll offer them 2%. Excellent. You know what? Then you're going to click this box here, and you're going to put your 2 in here and your NA here. Now, seller B. So 10B says the seller authorizes the broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker from the seller. This is not going to be from the amount in section 8. That's separate. So you put 2% above, that's what you're getting paid. You put 2% in 10B, that's what the seller is going to pay the buyer's broker. Any questions?
So then the whatever the seller's gonna pay is gonna come out of the seller's funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Comes out of that. That's very clear, and that's contrary to the conversation that we had last week.
Yes.
But this is, I've had time to dig in and ask questions. This is the new way.
So 6%, if seller agree to pay 6%, 8A is 3%, and 10B is 3%.
So it will be one or the other. Understand this. So let's just because I want everybody to grasp this. There's 2 ways of doing it. If you're doing 6% and you're taking a piece of that 6%, then it's 10A. If you're doing 2% and the seller says, that's okay, I'll pay another 2% to the buyer broker, that's going to be 2% above and then 2% in 10B. So
I have a question.
if you're splitting your commission broker to broker, it's 10A. If you're getting paid separately and the seller says, I'll pay the other guy separately, then it's a lower amount in 8 and a lower amount in 10B. Question online?
Yes, I have a question. I have heard that EXP is, I know I'm not EXP, but I am just a little worried about the liability of the 8A and the 10A of doing the broker to broker. I don't really quite understand why are they continuing the broker to broker.
Because the larger companies who are interstate are trying to unify everything. So what might apply in Florida might not apply in Georgia or Tennessee or Maine or wherever. So the larger companies are trying to unify and just say, here's one document for all of our agents everywhere in the United States.
Okay, so there's no risk to us either way, because
No.
okay.
As long as it's
All right.
clean and clear between you and the other and the seller. This is just about
Okay.
the contract and how you want to handle the finances. Because you know, and this is a great way. I had an agent talk to me at one point, and they mentioned that this is their approach. I only charge 2% to list a home. Oh, really? That's great. Okay, now let's talk about what you would want to pay, if at all, a buyer broker. So you're in the door and you're 2%, and then you're having a conversation with the buyer broker. Great. We're going to pay him, you know, I only want to pay the buyer broker a point and a half. And you can say, okay, then you put that in there and it separates it out.
Okay.
All right. So in this page, that's the big thing. So you've negotiated, let's say you've gone up and you've said, you're going to pay me, seller, you're going to pay me 2%. And you've offered to pay the buyer broker 1%. Great.
Can I stop for a clarification here real quick?
Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, Allan, we're not saying that the agent should be recommending that the seller pay 1% or 1.5%.
No, what we're recommending is an even split. If you're paying me 2, this is the way we would normally have done it, is you would offer 2% to the other agent.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes. Look, we are a transaction-based brokerage. So we don't dictate what you negotiate with your deal. Something I want to touch on, thank you for that, because when you're negotiating, don't forget that there is the $845 broker's fee. That's standard, always has been. That's where you put it, $845 broker's fee. And that's negotiable too, because if they don't want to pay the whole thing, you can offer to pay a portion of it and put whatever they're willing to pay. If you split it in half, you put it in there, but make it part of the contract. All of these other items are the same, as far as termination date, protection periods, retained deposits. Let's just talk about that real quick. Retained deposits. The old version said, if left blank, 50%. And I don't know an agent that's ever enforced this with a listing where a buyer breached and the seller was able to retain the $2,000-$3,000, however much was in escrow. But you do, as the listing agent, have a right to claim whatever percentage you negotiate. So here's a place where you can put in, look, if the buyer breaches, it's my practice to, I retain 25% or whatever of the escrow. And most sellers, because you're putting in all the effort anyway, just carried the contract up until the point they breached. So when you do the release and cancellation, you would make sure that that percentage is written off to you and the rest off to the seller in those instances. So you can no longer place it blank, because if you leave it blank, then it's automatically nothing.
So if that was the case and something like that was to happen, the 50% of that deposit comes to the brokerage, and
Well, it goes to the agent, and we would take our 10%. The agent would get the remainder. So if you had a $3,000 deposit and you were claiming 50% on a $3,000, it's $1,500. A maritime would get $150. You'd get the remainder.
Do us online a favor and repeat the question whenever somebody asks it, because we can't hear.
You
It's
can
kind
hear
of
that?
muffled.
Yeah, speak up, will you? No.
I'm at the end of the
So the question was, thank you, Terry. The question was that if how's that split? Where does that go? So if any fees we collect beyond residential commission, is a 90-10 split. So the only thing we don't split on are residential sales commissions. If we do rental fees that come in, any other particular fees that come in, a maritime takes 10%, the balance goes to the agent. So if a release and cancellation was executed on a $3,000 escrow and the agent brokerage received $1,500 and Martha Sosa was the agent, we take our $150 and give Martha Sosa the balance, the 90%. Okay, good. Any other questions? All right. I think we're good. That was the big part. That was it. That's the crux of what we need to deal with listing contracts. Any other questions? All right.
You may have already said this. I just wanted to reiterate it because I didn't hear it. I may have just been doing something else. Did you mention that they've changed the word for commissions to compensation just about everywhere?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's cool. Okay, so you have your listing agreement, and your you did the section 8. Ladies. So you did your listing agreement and you checked you've got 6% and it's 10A. So basically the seller said, hey, I'm going to pay we're going to allow broker to broker. Now you're going to have them sign this agreement. This is a separate agreement. This is the compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. You will put the details in here. Buyer's name, optional. So this is like one of those forms we would have pre-filled out. And the reason you want to have this is because if you go under contract, you're going to get a phone call because we can't list the compensation in the MLS. And you're going to get a phone call. And the agent's going to call you and say, what are you offering? Well, we're offering 2% for a buyer broker. Excellent. You'll have it in writing. And so when you go under contract, you'll already have this pre-filled out, signed by the seller, and initialed, by the way. And actually, this is broker to broker. So you're going to have the agent sign it, and you're going to sign it. So basically, you'll have the seller filled out. You'll have the broker, buyer's broker left. You'll have the property address. You're going to have the buyer's name will be left blank to be filled in. Term in effect it's going to be in effect for the time of the contract. That's going to be blank until you fall into contract. Buyer's broker compensation, you're going to put whatever is in the listing agreement in here. This, by the way, will be what will be presented to title. In the past, title would just go online, read what's in the MLS, and that's what they'd hold to. They won't be able to do that anymore. I already had the conversation with Barbara, and I've sent her copies of all this. This is what you're going to hand over to title. And this is what's going to show good faith to the agent that's on the buyer's side. They're going to have it in writing. So it won't be just a text. You might start with a text, but if you fall into contract, you're going to have to execute this. And it says broker to broker. MLS is leaving it up to us. This is policy is on who we allow to sign what. And we're going to allow it's broker or authorized associate. So we're going to allow you to negotiate, work with your buyers, and sign and execute these. In a particular instance where you've done a listing agreement and it's separate, where it's the seller paying the 2% and not broker to broker, they have a separate form for that. So you're going to have proof of sale. In this particular instance, you will need the seller's initials and a buyer broker. So again, the seller will have to execute this as well as their agent, seller, and buyer's broker. So it's between you and the seller. So they'll have this. The listing agent will have this all pre-filled out and signed, like we do with like HOA docs and home disclosures and things of that sort. This will be one of those docs. Now, don't attach it. Do not attach any of these forms to your MLS listing. Yeah, I know. I read it. It came through space to me because we like to, we like to make it convenient for our agents for those HOA disclosures and lead paint disclosures and all that pre-filled out stuff. Do not attach this one. You will get nailed.
Allan, I noticed that it says broker or authorized associate, and then below in the initials, it says buyer's broker, which I think it's just referring to whoever's authorized to sign.
That's correct.
It's just
don't send these to me.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that so that everybody wasn't sending those to be signed.
Yeah. Don't send. Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't send these to me or Allan. You. This is between you. I'm sorry. What?
I think the listings state the same thing too. The broker authorized. So
Some of them do.
they like that.
Some of them do. So we're good. I'm not. I have them here in the loop. They will be there in the loop. Modifications to these agreements.
Are we also sending this one to title as well? The
Yes,
2%?
it's the one or the other.
Yep.
So if you have an agreement where money is coming from one place to, because this needs to get on the altar or the HUD, this is what they're going to require. To not send them your listing contract. Send them this document. That'll make it a lot simpler. Any other questions before I move on?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So this one, the compensation agreement is just for title.
Well, it also validates that, to the buyer's agent that they're going to get paid.
So the agreement, what about the exclusive buyer agreement? Isn't that enough? Or
That's separate. This is between you, the listing agent, offering compensation to the buyer, to the buyer's broker. You're the listing agent. This all has to do with listing agent. These are all. Now, if you're checked 10C where they're not paying anything, then you're not going to use any of these co-op compensation agreements.
so this is just for listing, not if you're a buyer's agent.
This is all, yes, this is a listing loop.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
When should we be talking about the compensation after, when we're ready to present an offer?
Well, it's going to be up to you. You're the buyer's agent. So some buyer's agents might call before showing and ask. And some buyer's agents may call when they're getting ready to write the offer and ask. If you're getting ready to write you're going to want to know. So look at it this way. You're a buyer agent and you've got a buyer that can't afford a house that they know from their lender that they're going to require concessions. I'm going to need 3% toward closing costs and prepaids. The lender's already told them that you're not going to be able to get in without the seller giving you back 3%. Okay, so you're going to find a home with a seller that's willing to do that. Many times we find homes where we do our comps, even for our buyers, and we can look in there and go, I think there's some room to wiggle. And so a lot of times I've had agents, I've done it myself, offer 3% over to net the 3% back. So basically I'm going to offer you 3% over your price, your list price, but I'm asking the buyer to give that back to me so that I can use that toward my closing costs and prepaids. And it's 3%, it really doesn't throw their offers, the numbers off too much. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's a concession. If the buyer, if the buyer's offering concessions, then, that's great. If they're not, you can use it as a negotiating tool. Hey, my buyers are strong. They have this. They're willing to do this. Will the seller consider paying closing cost prepaids and my fee? And you'd make that part of the bargaining. And then if you come to an agreement, great, you write up the offer and you go forward. Understand this too. I think it's important. Lenders, for right now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are allowing the extra concession to not impact they're allowed concessions. So you might be asking for 3% on an FHA or conventional. You're allowed to ask for the 2% or 1 or whatever it happens to be. You're allowed to ask for that. And if it's part of the contract, the 2% won't affect the 3. It won't impact the lender's approval. It's separate till I hear different. Right. So that's true. You can ask under FHA, you can ask for up to 6%. A lot of people don't. A lot of people only need 3, or sometimes it's just a flat amount. But regardless, you can increase that and work it out. Any other questions before we move to buyers? All right, I think we're going to have a lot more questions on this one. So when you create a buyer loop, this is what you're going to get up top. Right up here, new compliant NAR forms. At the very top, the exclusive buyer broker agreement. If you've ever done an older buyer broker agreement, you're going to see the main difference on the first page is that the item 3, it used to say it was the property and the location and the loan amount or price range, and if they were pre-qualified, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff. In this particular instance, it's not asking you for that. It's asking you for the type of property, and it's asking you for location. I'm going to tell you the same thing I've always taught on all of these. You want to use a broad brush.
Earth.
Yes? So the type of property, residential. Don't write in single family home. Don't write in townhome. Don't write in condo. Single family home. You want to write in residential. If you specifically go for a particular type of property, like a specific make, then you're going to cut yourself off that they changed their minds. Type of property, residential, location, Florida. Now, in those rare instances where you might be working with an investor or somebody who's not decided where they want to land, and they look at you and say, you know what, I've already got an agent in Tampa working, and I'm just, I've got it down there. So I want Orlando, or I want Orange County. You can be my guy or my agent for Orange County. Great. Then you're going to negotiate that. You'll put in the location as county or counties, because in our area it could include all the surrounding ones, right? You got Orange and Lake and Sumner and Volusia and Seminole and Polk and Osceola. So cover a huge area. So those are the different parts on the first page. They have not done much as far as rewording the obligations portions. Those are fine. Retainer is different in that they do not provide. We're at the top of section 2. Retainer, they do not provide an option for making it refundable. So if you're going to charge a retainer and you're negotiating that with your buyer, then you would put that amount in here. If it's something you wanted to credit to them at closing, then you might want to put that under additional terms on section 13 on page 3. That you can, if they pay a retainer, now pay attention, the retainer is paid to a Maritime Realty. And in the comment section, they can put the property and the agent name. We hold it. We will not cash it and distribute it. We're not going to take our 10%. We're not going to do any of that unless it's distributed to the agent because of the cancellation or whatever. So we'll hold that until the close. If you have in here that other terms, compensation. Broker's compensation is earned when, this is number 7 on the second page of your buyer broker agreement. Broker's compensation is earned when, during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension, consumer, not buyer, consumer, but it's the buyer, or any person acting on behalf of the consumer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement, or defaults on any contract to acquire property. In other words, if you're on a contract with your buyer, you get them into a home and things are going great, and they go out and buy a car and they blow it, you can still hold them accountable to pay your compensation. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. I know people who have used broker compensations. I don't know a lot of people who have enforced this. So there you go. So this compensation is for the broker services. Now, capitalized broker, and here's the buyer broker for the consumer. Compensation received by the broker, if any, from the owner or owner's broker, or the seller or the seller's broker, for services rendered to the consumer will reduce any amount owed by the consumer per this paragraph. So how do you explain that? Well, if we go into contract and I'm charging you, 2%, and they're paying 2%, then great. If they're only paying 1%, you're going to be responsible to me for the other 1%. Any questions? All right. So you would put in your fee, whether it's a flat fee or percentage, or in our case, a flat fee plus. So you would put in your percentage. I'm going to, we're looking at $400,000 to $500,000 homes. I'm going to charge 2% plus $845 broker fee.
I know, you keep reducing our compensation.
It's
never 3% for you.
It's
2%.
it's negotiable, and I think that's the thing I'm just trying to drive home. If you can get 3%, that's great. But here's a plus. If you're looking at a $500,000 home, you're looking at $10,000. And the conversation might go something like this because they're feeling a little uneasy. And so you're going to have the same conversation you would always have for them. Look, I understand you need concessions. So we're going to look together for homes that are offering concessions and covering these. Tell you what I'll do. If a seller's offering more than 2%, I'll split the difference with you. The extra point will split, and you can that'll go toward your closing costs or prepays. That's a good negotiating tool. And here's why you want to negotiate it, because this is key. I'm going to jump down to the bottom of page 3 in section 14. Under acknowledgments, modifications, blah, blah, blah. Consumer has read and agreed and understands its contents. This agreement cannot be changed except by written agreement signed by both parties. Electronic signatures will be binding. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That's a given. Broker may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to by the consumer. So if you put in 2, right, that's why I put in 2.5, right? So if they offer 3, I'm still getting my 2.5, but I can get the half point back to them. Understand this. Unless the buyer agrees, you've negotiated 2.5%. The seller's offering 3, you can't collect 3 unless the buyer agrees. Anybody not? Oh, somebody's off mute. Oh,
So with that question, or with that statement, wouldn't it make sense for us to start at 3?
Yes.
Or higher?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Look, as a transaction brokerage, we don't dictate commission or compensation now. Sorry, we don't dictate that. So that is going to be between you and your buyer. You know, the more confidence you have, and this is an important part too, and this has come up in other conversations, and I want to share this, and I think this is if anyone's got ideas or concerns or anything, now's the time to voice them, because we do not do business with strangers. So if you have built a relationship with somebody and you're getting to the point where you're ready to show them homes, mind you, you can send them homes via MLS drip, auto email, not a problem. You can continue to do that. But when you're getting ready, maybe you're getting them through the pre-qualification process, and you're on the phone with them and their lender, and you're having conversations about their family and their friends, their occupation, you know, the form. As you're building your relationship with them and you're getting ready to go and show homes, by that time, they should have some level of trust in you where they're like, you know what, I get it. I understand that wherever I go, I'm going to have to sign a document like this. Yes, you will. Wherever you go, you can't get around it. But I put my trust in you, right? You want to build your relationship to a point where it's like, fine, I'll sign anything, whatever, I'm good for it. And that's where we all want to be. We don't want to have to sit there and cow and beg and all of these things. And I think some people have that fear and that perception. But if you've built a good relationship and you've got something going with these people that you're helping, and you've presented your value, and you've shown through getting them pre-qualified in the whole process, and you've walked them through and understand what's happening, then I think you get a lot less pushback and easier negotiation. Look, in this particular instance, for all the work I'm going to be doing, for all the value I'm adding, my fee is 2.5% at a minimum. And so we're going to look for homes that are going to be offering concessions, not only with that, but that will help with closing costs, prepaids, and those things. And if we find a home that's offering more than 2.5%, I'm happy to credit the extra 0.5 point back to you towards your closing costs and prepaids, money back in your pocket. One of the other things too that's come up in other conversations is we can add value in other ways. We have a relationship with a security company where they're going to go in and at no cost to the buyer. At no cost to the buyer, go in once they move into their house. They'll either update or install a brand new security system and pay the first 6 months of monitoring for free. That's like almost $4,000 in value. And if you wanted to cover the other 6 months, you're talking between $30 and $40 a month for 6 months. They get a new security system and 1 year. 1 year is already covered for their monitoring, and that's $4,000 value. If it's not me. So we have options. I think we just need to we're going to have to wrap our heads around this. And I got a lot of agents already been using this, and it'll be easier now because they won't be able to go anywhere without signing an exclusive buyer broker agreement.
All right. Need to check in. Just wanted to check in. Johnny, you guys' mic is unmuted. Did you have a question or a comment that you needed to break in for?
Yeah.
Just also for clarification, thank you, Terry, for watching that for me. Just for note of clarification, if you have a signed agreement for 2 and your buyer's like, yeah, I'm willing to let you take the 3, you'd have to do a modification to the agreement. Make sure you have it in writing.
Yeah, they're good. They just they muted. They just were unmuted. I just want to make sure they didn't have a question, because I know we were trying to get you to wait until you got to a stopping point or in between points, and I just wanted to make sure that if they did have a question, that they were able to ask it. All right, we're good.
Ramesh.
So in this line number,
Back up on page under the retainer.
Compensation.
Page 2, yes.
And 7A, my buyer says we give you 3%.
Yep, you would put 3 there.
3 there.
Yep.
And now we look at the house, and the seller is offering only 2%.
Right.
So the buyer says, I'm not gonna give you 1%. Can we do the modification there?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can modify up or down,
Up or down? Okay.
not a problem. Just be aware that if you do section 7A, it's the first two fields don't include the broker's fee. So it would be the second set of fields, which would be you put your 2% plus your 845 broker's fee. You do that, and then you would put generally what I do is I put NA, and so they're,
Yeah,
they're not,
and keep in mind, everyone, it's not like we've done this before. This whole thing is new to everyone, so it's not like everybody's been out there, having these discussions. That was a great question about going up and going down. Is it okay to go in either direction? But the reality of how that conversation, we're just guessing how that conversation is going to play out at this point, because reality is going to have a whole new result, and we'll be able to learn and share with each other in meetings like this what works and what doesn't, and our experience and your experience, so we can help each other improve as we go along.
Sure. And, and as I always remind people when I'm teaching these contracts, don't leave your lease and options blank. I know we're talking about purchases here, but if you're going to go through and whether you're doing a listing agreement or a buyer broker agreement, make sure that your lease and options, because in the rare instance that your seller turns around, says, I'm going to rent the house out, or the buyer says, oh, I found an opportunity, I'm going to rent, then you're going to have a fee for that too. So just kind of don't leave it blank.
Adding back to this question, what happens if now I want, instead of 2% we agree on,
Yep.
I don't want to modify it, but the listing agent is willing to give me half a point.
You still have to modify it.
Modify it.
You cannot,
Use the other, okay.
you cannot take more.
No, not more.
What-
2.5, let's say I want.
So you've negotiated 2.5%.
I negotiated 2,
Yep.
the listing agent's getting 3, but she'll share half.
So she's gonna,
Okay.
the offering of compensation is 3%, a half a point over?
No, they say they're not offering anything. The seller is not offering anything to the buyer agent. But she's willing, the broker, the seller agent is willing to.
She would have to get that written approval from her seller,
Okay.
and then,
Modify what?
so she's willing to make up that half a point.
Half a point.
So she would have to get an agreement. She'd have to modify her listing agreement, and then she would have to do a seller's compensation to the broker, or a broker to broker, or whatever, wherever she's getting the funds from. If she's giving half a point from her own compensation, she would have to modify that broker to broker, half a point, and then do one of those broker to broker compensation sheets.
Okay.
So yeah, the seller's agent, if they want to give you something out of their pocket, they have to jump through hoops to get it. Right now, we just make the decision to do it, and we do whatever, and somebody writes a letter and says, yeah, okay, but not anymore.
Can I throw in 2 cents about this? The not being able to not being able to get any more than you've arranged with the consumer. It was really bugging me for a while, and it just came to me a little while ago. I think the reason they're doing that, part of this full disclosure thing is the division between the buyer and the seller. And now that we're actually setting this agreement up, that we're working for the buyer and the buyer is paying us, it's basically it's ensuring that the buyer knows who you're working for and what the agreement is. Because if you arrange something with them and then you're getting, just think about it with any business, whether it's the lender or the inspection company, and about money flowing back and forth, who are you actually working for, that kind of thing. So I think that's why they did that with this document, where they limited, hey, you can't actually get any more than you've arranged for with your buyer that they're aware of, right? And so they force you to make everybody aware of any of the money going in either direction.
That's correct. Too many people get surprised at the closing table. They're looking at the HUD going, wait, you're getting how much? I think
Hey,
that's
Allan?
part of it.
quick question.
Yes.
To make the deal close, let's say that either the refrigerator's not working or you've got to replace the stove, and you're willing to take care of that. I know a lot of agents have done it to get the deal closed.
Sure, I just did one.
So how do we do that now?
That's an addendum.
Just a
Because
simple addendum?
yeah, that's a simple addendum to the contract. I actually did one where we had to, it was a mobile home that was real property, but it didn't pass engineer inspection and required updates. And we just did it we did it ahead of time. I pitched in money, the other agent pitched in money, and the seller pitched in money, and we got it done. So what you do with your commission, that's different. If you're getting your 2% or 2.5% or 3%, you got your 3%, and then you're giving part of that, you're crediting part of that commission for this, that, or the other. It still has to be documented, but at that point, it's just notifying title. Usually, it's in a letter where you've already given agreement, or we do it in the DA letter. Sometimes I've written broker letters because it doesn't change you receiving that commission. What you're doing is you're receiving your commission and saying, I'm giving a piece of this to the buyer or the seller. This only has to do with broker. It's the broker to broker or seller to broker. How much you're receiving. What you do with what you receive, then that part hasn't changed.
Okay.
I got a question for you, Allan, as well. When it comes down to a new build, where the builder's the one providing the percentage, we're meeting these clients for the first time in a model homes, whatever, showing room, whatever. That's going to apply as well.
No, it's different. It doesn't apply to builders.
Because I know that's what we wanted to know. Because I mean, so how you deal with that? We're supposed
Same way we always do.
Okay.
Same way. You're going to go with your client for your first visit. You're going to bring them through. You're going to get them registered. If at some point you go under contract, you're there. They usually have like a single sheet.
Yeah, the former. Yeah.
You'll form. That's not going to change.
Okay,
Are you saying that you don't need the buyer agreement signed before you take them?
Oh, you need that. You need a buyer broker
Okay, that's
agreement.
my question. Yes.
Oh, yes. You need a buyer broker. Before you show a home, you'll have a buyer broker agreement.
Even it's a new construction and everything else.
Yes.
The whole process.
Now, this is very interesting because, one of the things that I put out there, and I'll put it out there again because I want everybody to know, your broker's going to go to battle for you. So I have an agent who has a buyer broker agreement in place, and they quote unquote, I'm using air quotes. You can't see that online, or maybe you can. I don't know. I have a buyer who was looking at homes and then went and looked at new homes. A buyer who didn't know anything about real estate but knew to ask for a release and cancellation from her buyer broker agreement. And we're not releasing her. No, if you've changed your mind, you don't want to buy a home, great. Don't buy a home. The buyer broker agreement, I think this is important too, does not enforce somebody to actually buy a home. I think that sometimes that may need to be clarified. If you change your mind, decide you do not want to buy a home, that's fine. If they want to cancel, they can cancel. But it's a conditional termination. Section 9 actually states at the consumer's request, broker may agree to conditionally terminate this agreement. If broker agrees to conditionally terminate the agreement, consumer must enter a written agreement to this effect and pay a cancellation fee. Broker may void the conditional termination. Consumer may pay a fee. So you can negotiate, but I can allow the cancellation, but hold it into effect. So basically, consumer will pay the fee stated in the compensation, the second half of Section 9, paragraph, less the cancellation fee, if any, from early termination date, plus the protected period. So basically, the consumer, if within your period, let's say you had a 6-month plus a 90-day, so you had 9-month period, and they buy a house within that, then they still owe you the difference unless you unconditionally terminate. So a lot of people will want out of your contract. You can say, yeah, go ahead. You don't have to buy a house. So if they get under contract with a new construction and you got a buyer broker agreement in place, they're going to owe you the commission on that. Or they're going to at least owe you the percentage points that that are going to be that you've negotiated.
Now, 2 cents on that statement, just because we're talking about that area right now, the conditional termination. I had an agent that I was working with not too long ago, and she had somebody that she felt like she could trust, and they gave her a story about why they needed to cancel the listing or the contract or whatever it was. And we did a complete release and cancellation without any other little checkbox items to deal with. And they ended up listing with somebody else, and it was, somebody else peeping in that person's ear to get them to get the release and cancellation. The story was not true. Protect yourself.
Those are lessons to be learned. Those are lessons to be learned. But it comes down to, if it comes down to, and, I used to say this in the past. So in the past, agents who wanted to use a buyer broker agreement, but were apprehensive of poisoning the well with their customers, I would just tell them your broker's an asshole and requires this.
He's not here.
I'm that's why he hired me. So I can be the asshole broker. So my broker requires this. And that way, if they gave pushback and they were argumentative and you didn't want to lose them as a customer, you can say, that's okay. Or, you know what? That's fine. Let's move forward. I'll talk to my broker. Back then I didn't care whether you had it signed or not. It was up to you. And it was a way to get that comfort. It's like, are they going to give a lot of pushback, or did you develop a good enough relationship where they're fine, I'll sign anything. But if they didn't and certain things came up in conversation, you could see the red flags and be prepared for them. That's not the case anymore. Now it's Department of Justice has made certain requirements that, even though they haven't been finalized, NAR is obliging to what it's presented. So if anyone talks about this being the law, it technically is. And how we hold to these agreements and these contracts is going to be very important. You should also know that many of you have come in the office, might have met Chris Minius. He's an attorney, rents one of his offices here. And I've already spoken to him. We're going to be reviewing these contracts and putting together scenarios so that we can have form letters and things prepared and work out, nominal fees, whatever, to give us the option. Anybody who's ever tried to fight one of these, there has been up to date no support from the association or anybody in giving us direction or resources to have this done. And in this particular instance, I want to be prepared for that. So just kind of know. Don't fall for the stories. If you do, lesson learned, move on. Don't do it again.
Allan, quick question.
Yeah.
Okay.
A scenario.
There's a scenario here. So the listing agent the seller is not giving any concession.
Okay.
To the buyer's agent. Okay.
Neither the.
Now, what would happen if you have a cold call and somebody wants to see a home? They refuse to sign the buyer's agreement. Now, are we ethically, or do we fall under any
Well, you can't show the
laws that we have to show the house, or
you know what? Here, hold that thought. Table that question. Any more questions? Table that. That's an important question. Any more thoughts?
Is.
Any more
Because
questions?
the legal part of it is like, what do you do?
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. So table that question. Anybody have questions on this form?
I have a question. When was this form updated? Because I had my buyer sign one last week. Has it been updated since then, or?
This is the EBBA 7TB. It was updated July 24.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I got a question.
Yes.
Let's suppose that, I'm gonna go with my cousin, sign a buyer broker agreement and give that, I'm only gonna charge you 2%.
Yep.
Okay? And then I end up at Pulte Homes, and Pulte Homes is offering 4% for me.
Yep.
So how does that work now with the buyer again?
You have to renegotiate. You're going to have to do a modification to your buyer broker agreement. Yep.
Thank you.
Good question. And did everybody hear that question? The question was, if I sign a buyer broker agreement for 2% and Pulte's offering 4%, can I get the 4%? Yes, you have to renegotiate and do a modification to your buyer broker agreement.
From your 4%. Now he's gonna want.
Yes.
24.
All right.
Especially family members.
All right. Now, and this will play toward your question, Johnny. We have covered our exclusive buyer broker agreement. Now we have buyer broker light. So MLS has come up with a condensed version, a single page, a property pre-touring agreement. In other words, you got a cold call and somebody says, I'm not signing that 4 pages and signing my life away for the next 6 months to do all of this stuff. Okay, I have a pre-touring agreement. And in this particular instance, what I can do is you can make it between you and the consumer for maybe a shorter number of days. So maybe you've got, your exclusive buyer broker agreement, you're doing, you've got it out for 3 to 6 months, or maybe it's, 3 months with another 3-month protection period, something like that. This could be a much shorter period. You can do it for, 7 days, 4 days, or whatever you have. The brokerage commission, again, is here. And it has the bold statement: compensation from any source will not exceed the amount of compensation in a written agreement with you. It's the same thing, but this is a much shorter form. And so if you show them and you get on the contract, this is where you would put in that information. And you would check all the boxes that apply. At closing, I would 845, or I would do your percent. I'm going to charge you 3% gross purchase price plus 845 broker's fee. So this is where you would work. Or for whatever other reason you had other, maybe you are collecting a retainer, you would put it in here, other retainer due upon signing of this agreement, whatever that happens to be. So this is a much shortened form, where I'm just going to have you sign this for the week that we're going to be together looking at homes. So if we go under contract, great. If we don't go under contract, fine.
After 7 days, then what?
And then it's terminated.
She can go with the other broker and get the same property done?
So she could. So what you can do is this. You can do a showing agreement. So the showing agreement is a little bit longer. It's not 3 pages. It's only 2. But you can make this agreement property specific. I'm going to show you all of these properties within this time frame, and then all of the other obligations apply. This is where you would put your purchase price. If we go under contract, this is what you're going to pay me, unless, of course, they pay, they pay me, things of that sort. So this is kind of a lighter version. It's in between the pre-touring agreement. And interestingly, I found out that the showing agreement's been in, it's been in the dot loop and our transaction desk and all that forever. This is just a modified version. So you've got your exclusive buyer broker agreement, which is your hot and heavy one. You've got your showing agreement, which is your lighter version, and you can make it property specific. And then you have a really short one with not a lot of details. In here, if you were doing this and you were showing properties, you might under other, it's under compensation. There's really no place to put additional terms or anything like that. So you might want to use, depending on your case, you have your three different ones to use. You also have a perspective. So you also have a separate. Now this is separate in the instance where if you're doing a short form and you want to collect a retainer, there is a separate retainer agreement. And by the way, you can actually use this retainer agreement for, if you're driving around showing rentals. We all hate showing rentals. I liked them as a brand new agent, gave me a lot of experience, but once I got my experience, I was good to go. And so if you're spending a lot of time showing rentals, you can do a retainer agreement where they pay you up front. But you can do this for a buyer. Now, this does not comply with what you would be required for a buyer broker agreement or a pre-agreement before touring a house. The top ones would. In this particular instance too, I've included the modification to exclusive buyer broker because that's the big one. The others do not have modifications available. You would have to rewrite the agreement. Any questions? So,
Yeah.
So Johnny, those two, right? Those other options in a short-term cold call, great. I need you to sign something. You could swing one or the other two, correct?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. So if you got
Yes.
a cold call and you're showing some properties, you can do a property specific one, or you could do or just a lighter version. If you're going to work with them longer term, I would recommend before the other one ends, I would recommend bumping up to an exclusive buyer broker agreement. It's more comprehensive and explains a lot more. But either of those three forms will be allowable for the MLS. So the MLS is not going to be policing these things per se. In other words, we're not going to be putting these on file for anybody that, it's just, they're always got to upload them. We're not doing that. There are provisions. If you take it upon yourself to show, I'm just going to show a quick house. It's just one house. And, I don't have time to do this, or I'll follow up after. You might get away with it. But if somebody complains about anything about you, they're going to look. They're going to look. Oh, by the way, did you have a buyer broker agreement with that person? And you better be able to produce one dated prior to when you showed the house. First fine is $500. Second fine is $2,500. Third fine is $15,000. I haven't gotten clear information from the MLS on how that impacts the broker. I know a lot of times if agents don't work out their issues, it does fall back on the broker. So I'm going to tell you, if there's a second time, you won't be an agent here at Maritime anymore, because we can't take that kind of risk. Okay, so. Get away from the hot and heavy. I came in this morning, as I do every morning now, and I went into floridarealtors.org, and I went into tools and research. I went into form updates just to see, hey, by the way, did they have any new forms? And yes, as of sometime yesterday, they did come out with the updated version of the modification to listing agreement. Those will already be in your loop. Those are there. And a compensation disclosure statement. This disclosure should be given to the buyer, seller, owner of any if the existing listing agreement or buyer agreement does not contain this disclosure. Okay, so I've got a lot of agents calling me now, hey, they took that off. What do I have to do? You don't have to change your agreements. You don't have to rewrite your agreements. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to go in the MLS. You don't have to edit your listings unless somewhere verbally in the realtor remarks or in public remarks, you say, hey, I'll give you a bonus, or if you refer to concessions or anything like that, you want to pull those out and you want to put them in the concessions section. Do that. I've also, in speaking with, and I think some of the videos that came out with MLS, that they're going to go easy with us on the first, 60 days or so to get used to all of this. But then at some point, they're going to start dropping the hammer. So if you have an existing listing agreement, and I would just implement this now. It's brand new. I haven't even downloaded it, and it's already in .loop. You're gonna have to go look for it. And this wouldn't necessarily be something you're gonna need in the far future. If you have an existing listing agreement, they're asking that you have them execute this compensation disclosure statement. And all it states is that, here's the brokerage. That's, you, agent for Maritime Realty, advises buyer seller that this compensation disclosure statement relates to your buyer listing agreement dated. That's your effective date of contract. Or if it's your listing, it's your listing, start date. As a result of the National Association of Realtors proposed settlement agreement and related practice changes, the following disclosure is required in all buyer listing agreements. Notice to buyer, seller, owner, brokerage compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable. There you go.
So the previous listing, we have.
If you have an existing listing,
just send this.
Just get them. Yeah, it'll be in .loop or it'll be in transaction desk. Bring it up, send it off, get him to sign it, keep it on file. I also want to end here. If you haven't been to this website, this is your MLS on Stellar MLS under compensation, resources, and FAQs. I will ask that all of you spend some time going through this. It's incredibly extensive. Seller MLS facts, buyer broker agreements. There's a lot of stuff in here regarding clarifications. Most of the stuff we already talked about, but here it is in writing. What constitutes touring? Oh, yeah, by the way, virtual touring, a video tour of the home. If you bring them through virtually, that includes, you're showing them a home inside. Yeah, you're going to have a buyer broker agreement. Yes.
One thing on this moving forward.
I can't, in these, in the time that we have here, I can't cover all of this. So you can, with the buyer broker agreement, you can actually go all the way to the bottom. You can download it, print it out into a PDF, it downloads into a PDF, and then you can print it out. For the folks here, I can make sure you have copies before you leave. But it looks like this, and it's multiple pages. It's 22 pages long, full of Q&A. Open houses. Right now, Stellar is allowing agents to do an open house without having to have a buyer broker agreement in place.
Say that again, please.
If you're doing an open house and it's not your listing, whether it is or not, you can show that house because technically under MLS rules, you're working for the seller. Now, if they determine that they want to buy the home, then you would want to put the agreement in place. But as of right now, you're working for the seller if you're doing an open house, which I found.
If it's your listing, I'm there.
If I'm doing an open house for your listing, I'm working for your seller. I called them. The caveat with that is to trying to adhere to NAR and judicial, the higher law, but we also have state laws. And Florida does not allow for what's the term I'm looking for?
Sub-agency.
Thank you. Here's my conscience. Yes, Florida sub-agencies are illegal. Anyone who doesn't know the history of sub-agency, up until the 1990s, there were no such thing as buyer brokers. Up until the 1990s, everybody worked for the seller. And so if you brought a buyer, technically you would get paid as a sub-agent for that brokerage for the seller. That's how they determined it. And you work for the seller. Everybody worked for the seller. And they made that illegal in Florida. So here you are, you're with a maritime and you're doing an open house for Watson Realtor, and you're working for their seller. I pointed this out to them. They said that they would, that it could change. And please understand that a lot of this could change. This is we're going to be in a state of flux now until, I don't know, for months, until people complain and realize that, the dogma is going to sink us.
2 new homes under construction 3 months ago have a contract done. Do we have to do anything?
No, because the builders wrote the contract.
Yeah.
That you're good there.
For seller concessionary on the MLS, I know you're not probably gonna go over this, but anything specifically that should not be under concession comments.
Okay, so if that's an excellent question, and you can actually go through this online FAQ, right? So you can actually go down here. There's a whole section here on concessions and what they're about. So
Is this gonna be separate to concessions towards the buyer
no,
broker?
concessions are concessions. And what it will tell you in here is if the seller is willing to pay an amount to the buyer, the seller is willing to pay 3, 4, 5, 6%, whatever it happens to be, it cannot be dictated that those concessions go toward the buyer broker compensation. It can be if the buyer's okay with it, if the seller is offering, 5% concessions and you're in a contract for 2.5%, that buyer can choose to say, yeah, I'm going to use that money to pay my buyer broker and I'm going to use the rest of the money to go toward my closing costs.
So this
If you put in, let me say this first. If you have a listing and you're offering 3% and you put in 3% for concessions, be very careful, because the buyer can choose to use that 3% for whatever they want. Not only this, but if the buyer comes in, doesn't have a broker, you still owe them the 3%.
Is this section being printed when you print out for customer synopsis? Like, you know how you print out the MLS?
Yes.
Seller concession?
There's a line where the offer used to see the percentage points. If you print out a listing, it's going to see concessions, yes or no, and amount.
Because I know the compensation commission for both parties were noted there once you print out, but if you print out the customer view, it does not come out. I was just.
Oh, no, if you print out the customer view, anything under realtor information does not show in the customer view. Although it's interesting because I was told that if you put in an amount for concessions, that will be visible through homes.com. It will be visible to, it will be visible to buyers that the concessions are being offered.
Can you repeat the statement before she asked the question about the 3%?
Has nothing to do with the
Concession.
buyer.
So the same question.
Wait, hold on. I got 2 questions here.
No, it's same question but different way. So let me ask you this way, and if I'm wrong, correct me. If I have a listing, now forget about my listing agreement with my seller, the 3%, 2%, what I'm offering to buyer's agent, forget about that question. If seller says I want to offer 2% or 3%, let's say 3% toward buyer's closing cost. So that 3% buyer's closing cost goes directly to the buyers who are gonna buy the house, and he can use that 3% whatever he like to use. But that one is different than our commission, or this is all one bundle?
Well, when you read under here, it's just whatever the seller is willing to offer in concessions.
So the concession is compensation is a concession too?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all bundled.
And it's funny here because a lot of times, I'm reading in concessions under here and I'm looking for yes or no answers and they don't say yes or no. Can we use concessions field to communicate compensation?
Yeah, I would think it would just say no and then explain it.
No, these don't do that. It says here, so if you look at this paragraph here, there will be new fields for seller concessions to the buyer, but this new field is not a replacement for compensation fields. Concessions from the seller cannot be conditioned upon being used to compensate a buyer's broker and are not blanket offers or considered binding. Oh, not considered binding. Concession fields are optional and are not a replacement for offering compensation through the MLS. But it doesn't say no, you can't. So,
and I think the big glaring thing here, guys, is we need to stop looking for creative ways to communicate the commission. It cannot be in the MLS at all. Period.
while concessions, so this second paragraph over on the right here, while concessions cannot be conditioned upon using for compensation to the buyer's broker and are not binding. In other words, you can't go to somebody and say, hey, you offered 3% concession in the MLS. So what? Compensation fee and concessions from the seller can be negotiated through the contract offer to purchase. So you're looking at a listing, you get your buyer, they're offering 4% concessions. Now you can go in when you write up the offer that, okay, 2.5% is going to the buyer broker and the other is going through here, and you send it through and you can get it, you can make it part of the offer. You can negotiate it. But it's not binding. In other words, if it was in the MLS before, then you had to pay me 3%. You got 3% concessions, that goes to me. It can go to anybody.
So going back to concession comments. So if the seller is offering concessions towards prepay, would the comment be, would the disclaimer on that field be
For prepaid only.
and closing costs?
Yeah.
Is that the only thing you could?
Yeah,
actually
because
write on
if you look back at let's go back to dot loop and let's go back to listing. If you're talking with your seller and your seller comes down here in your exclusive right of listing and comes down here on the first page, seller expenses, seller will pay mortgage discount, other closing costs or concessions not to exceed this, and any other expenses seller agrees to pay in connection with a transaction. So there could be a set amount in here. Sorry. So it doesn't dictate. It says seller will pay mortgage discount or other closing costs or concessions not to exceed. Compensation is a concession now. So if they're offering, I've never actually seen an amount used in here. But if the seller is offering concessions aren't binding, which means the buyer can choose to use those concessions any way they want. So they might put some amount here and not down below. Hey, I'm offering the buyer this. Whatever they do with it, they can't. So those are the things that you're going to have to work out. I think there's some gray area in here.
So I have a question. So,
oh, hello, you cut out.
okay, let's just say like the seller's offering 4% for concession. So in the contract, then we would, like, obviously, if the buyer is okay with it, then you could put 2% of the seller's concession to go to the buyer's broker compensation at closing, and then 2% as a credit to the buyer's prepaids and that kind of thing. Is that how you would do it on the contract then?
Yeah. So let's go back to the buyer loop, and so you're writing your where are you? As is. You're writing your as is contract. You're getting ready to send that in. Down in section 9. Boom. you can, in section 9, put it in here. This is closing costs paid by, whether it's by the seller or by the buyer. You can actually, you can put it in here. So there's you can put your 2 or 3% in here, paid by the seller, 3% of purchase price to a Maritime Realty. Or I see it a lot of times, you'll see it in the additional terms.
Right.
3%.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, 3% of
And-
closing costs toward closing, right? So it's 4%, so it might be 2% toward closing
And
costs.
that's changed. And that's changed. Just to clarify, Alan, that's changed because previously they wouldn't allow us to do that, but you got the nod, or at least the they didn't tell you no.
So you mean the code of ethics?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I listen. I know you had that conversation and you had challenged that. So I
I-
wanted to make sure that we got a clear answer on that, or at least a okay for now kind of thing.
I did. You still can't make a contract contingent on whether you get paid or not. But how you negotiate the numbers in the contract and all that works out, that's wide open. So there's not only concessions, but there's also compensation down here. So it readdresses all of these on how we're going to get compensated. Will compensation fields be removed? Yes, they're removed. They're already been removed. How will commissions be communicated? Settlement only prohibits offers on the MLS on the platform that aggregate offers. So it does not prohibit conversations and negotiations outside of the MLS and requests for compensation and or concessions. You know that when you are negotiating, whatever you negotiate, you get it locked down, you put it in writing. The seller's willing to do this for the buyer, seller's willing to do this for the buyer. Great, we got it covered, we put it in writing, everybody signs, and we're good to go.
Great, thank you.
You know, it's funny too, there was actually a reference to the reference to MLS. So anybody, Code of Ethics 16-16 actually was an issue that has come up in the past where an agent wanted to renegotiate their commission as part of the contract. In other words, an agent came in and saw 2.5%, and they came back and said, well, I want 3%, and they would put it in the contract. And that was a Code of Ethics violation. It still is. If you haven't negotiated up front, if the seller's offering 2%, you've negotiated and you got 3, then that's great. You've negotiated it. But if you write a contract and you just put your demand as part of the contract, that will still break Code of Ethics 16-16.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, can we get clarification? Because I did my touring, what do you call it, pre-touring agreement.
Yep.
We're going under contract now. I did put it for 100 days, but I still need to do that, what is it? Buyers.
Yes. Well, okay. So you're doing it under an existing listing.
Right, which they already had 2.5%, but I put it in the contract.
And that's fine. Because
Right.
that's what you negotiated. That was what was in there.
Right.
The problem would be if she put like 3 or 3.5 now.
Yeah. So the problem in
No, I
the
put
past,
what they offered, what they were
that's
offering.
fine. No, that's fine. That's all
Oh,
you
okay.
need. The
Okay.
problem in the past would be, somebody would list for 2%. And, the buyer's agent wasn't happy with that. It's like, you know what? Fine, I'm going to write up the contract, but you're going to have to pay me 3. And they would put it in the additional terms without having the conversation.
Oh.
There's nothing wrong with asking. You can negotiate. Anybody can go in and say, I know you're offering 2.5. Can you give me 3? And you can work that out. But if you make it contingent, that's the problem. The contract is contingent. When you add anything into other terms, you're making the contract conditionable on those other terms. So if they don't meet those terms, it voids the contract, and that's where the breakdown lies. So
Okay.
if you negotiate and everybody agrees and you put it in writing, there was nothing wrong with that.
Well, I didn't have to really negotiate because they were offering that before MLS
No,
took out the commissions.
that's fine. I
Yeah.
understand.
But do I need to still do the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement? Because we're going under
Yes.
contract.
Well, you already did one. You did a pre-touring agreement.
Right.
That's fine.
So that's enough?
That's enough. Any one of those three forms is enough.
Oh, so we don't have to do the buyer's agreement. I thought the pre-touring was just to show.
Well,
They take the
I thought
place
that
of
was
it.
just to show, like, get a quick sign, but we still have to do the other one. So we don't. And that would be great.
You don't. There, it is in here.
So technically, we never have to use the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement.
So I had a question into them, and I found it here in the under buyer broker agreements. They're not needed for auto emails. I think this is it. Beginning on August 6th, brokers will need to have a process in place with their agents to complete completion of a BBA before the agent tours or shows a property. Florida Realtor forms have been released. Brokers may choose to use their own internal forms, though the forms must be compliant, and they have an FAQ for that. So basically what they've done is they've come down, Florida Realtors has released those three forms that we can use that will be compliant. So as long as we have, unless otherwise notified.
Well, good
but
thing
yes,
I put 100 days and not 5 days.
right. Well, once you're under contract, you're under contract. Now you have
Okay.
it. Now you have it on file.
Okay.
So now you have it on file. If anybody asks, then you can say, yeah, I have one right here.
Okay, perfect.
And so just to clarify, because I think this is where we're getting at with that, is that the old exclusive buyer agreement is replaced by these three options.
Yes. I'll find it. I'll find it in here again, but it did mention that Florida Realtors offered multiple documents that comply, and those are the three, not the retainer agreement. I threw it in there, but those are the three that will comply as a written document that you have between your buyer and yourself before showing a home.
This has been very helpful, Allan, because there's a lot of things you've clarified on this call,
Yes, this
and
is
I
great,
really
great
appreciate
news.
it.
The only thing I did not do, I did not put the $845 broker fee on the property pre-touring, but I did put it in the disclosures. It's in the disclosures and it's on the contract.
You probably won't get called on it, but you got to make sure you got your due diligence in there.
So I can speak to how we've always done it. You going forward, make sure you're putting it in that line that Allan had pointed out, because if it was ever questioned, the way that a maritime has always went with it is that you'd end up paying for it. So if you're intending for the buyer or the seller, somebody else to be paying for that, it needs to be on those lines.
Right. Yeah, I thought this was just a pre-touring just to show the house. I didn't even know if I can use it as, in replacement of the exclusive buyer brokerage at that time.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
No, I was saying I didn't put the $845. I didn't even know the property pre-touring agreement could be used in place of the exclusive buyer brokerage.
So it says here, what are the required contents of a buyer broker agreement per the MLS? And it lists 4. Specific and conspicuous disclosure of the amount or rate of compensation the broker will receive. So technically, you don't have to worry about it right now, but technically you're out of compliance because you had your percentage, you didn't include the 845. So that's one. Number two, the amount of compensation noted in a manner that is objectively ascertainable and is not open-ended. In other words, hey, you know what? I'm going to charge you somewhere between 2 and 3%. Don't do it. It has to be a fixed amount.
Right.
3, the provision that prohibits the broker from receiving compensation from any source that exceeds the amount rate agreed with by the buyer. And 4, a conspicuous statement that the broker fees commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. And these 3 agreements that FloridaRealtors.org sent out are allowable.
Okay.
Something else I wanted to go over real quick. Let me just look. I think there was another one. It may come up, and I just want you to be aware of it. This is another clarification. I know we got really into the broker may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed with consumer. We didn't touch on this, however, consumer agrees that the broker may receive separate compensation from the owner of the property for services rendered to the owner by the broker for which consumer will not be responsible. And you had to know I had to call on that one because that's just a lot of words that say, I'm your buyer broker, but I'm also the listing agent and I'm allowed to collect my listing fee. So if you're the list agent and you've got your 2% up top and they're offering the 2% below or the 3 and the 3, this allows you to collect without renegotiating to collect that original 3%. Everybody clear on that?
But it seems like they could have said that a lot clearer.
You'd think, right? And, when I talked to legal, they kind of, they agreed, but they weren't necessarily in control of that and why they couldn't just say that. I don't know, but there you are. So if you're the listing agent and you've negotiated your listing fee and you've got the buyer and you've negotiated with your buyer, you're good to go. You do not have to renegotiate anything for that. All right.
And we don't have to put it as concession, right? We just leave it as is on the listings. We're not putting it as buyer's concession.
You don't have to put anything in there. You don't have to. You don't have to put anything in concessions. Even if you are offering, it's your choice to be able to put something in that the buyer is willing to pay concessions. Just understand that the buyer, it's not binding like it used to be, right? So the title company is not going to look at the MLS and go, oh, yeah, they have to do that. They're offering it, but it has to be negotiated as part of the final contract. So concessions may be closing costs and prepaids, or it may be for the, used to compensate the agent. It's used a lot of ways.
Question.
Yes.
So in cases where the consumer asks to show him houses, he could, the realtor can show 10, 15, 20. So how much retainer we are talking about here?
That's negotiable. That's up to you. Some agents won't charge a retainer, and if you're going to be showing that many houses, it's going to be what you can negotiate. If what your buyer, if you're going to show your buyer homes and he's looking at you going, I'm not paying you $500 up front. Mind you, a retainer is paid up front. They write you a check, a Maritime Realty. And if your buyer says, no, I'm not paying you that, and they're going to go somewhere else, then you might want to rethink that. But we don't dictate retainers. Everything here is negotiable. Now you might have an investor that's willing to pay. I've had plenty of agents say, yeah, I got people paying retainers all the time, especially investors. If you know you're going to be searching around for a lot of homes, they might be fine with paying you $500 up front.
And my second question if you have exclusive buyer agreement, do you still have to have a showing agreement?
No, you only need one or the other. You don't need multiple forms. And you don't need one form per house. As long as you have one form in place, you can show them as many homes as you want.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we're, all our eyes are glazing over. I think we're getting ready to call it. Last call for any final questions.
Can you tell me which one is the one says the law change, this is just addendum to send it to the buyer or listing or whatever it is?
That, yes.
Where is that one in document?
It's going to be called, and you'll find it in transaction desk. It's going to be
No,
called,
it is only document nowadays.
it's going to be called this. Compensation Disclosure Statement.
At CDS. This one.
So in your, yes,
In
your
dot loop?
in your dot loop,
It's no, yes.
yep, in your dot loop, you will go to add document, template, go down to Florida Interactive. Here it is, compensation disclosure statement, right there, CDS one. So it's in your template, it's in your dot
all
loop
the
already.
previous listing and everything stays there as long as I give that one this, then I'm covered.
Yeah, if you got 3 or 4 listings out there, do these up for each listing, get them out to your customer, and just have them sign it. It's just due diligence.
I know some of us already went through the whole century lock swap. I think you mentioned you were gonna discuss something on, those that wanted to keep. I guess there's a lot of people doing business.
Yes, so for those who want to stay, we've got questions on the Century versus Supra. And so we'll cover that. There's not a lot of updates from my standpoint, so if you have questions, let me know. What we've determined is that we all know Aura is moving to the central lock. And Aura covers Orange County and Seminole. So every other county right now, outside of Flagler, I believe, are still on the super locks. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can get, if we have super locks, we can, exchange 1 or 2 of them or all of them if you want. But we have to get the new key. You should have all gotten your email from Aura. You should have all downloaded your new key, got it registered, and are all set. The super keys that we already have in place on our phone will end at the end of the month. They'll just go dead. What we can do, hear me out, what we can do is, I believe one of our agents has already worked successfully with Oscar to sign on as a non-member, and they're waiving the sign-up fee. So if you want to get a new super lock key, you can go to Oscar, or you can go to West Volusia Association of Realtors, WVAR. They're getting swamped right now, is what I've heard.
Yeah, you would have to fill out a form. I actually have it in front of me. I'm not sure it's the right form.
So you go to WVAR, you fill out the form, and that from that point they will call you, and they're still helping us all. It's just so backed up for the flood. So why do I need to keep both keys? Well, it's not so much for listing a home. I want to list a home here. Actually, it is, if you think about it. I want to list a home here in Orange County. I might want to put the new central lock in place, but I want to list a home in any of the other counties and want to have them access it. Well, maybe I want to give them a super lock. Now, I understand that the central locks are pretty easy going, and you can hand out the code, and it's good for a day or something like that. But you can't rescind it. Once you share that code, you can't pull it back. But think about this. You're going to go show a home in Davenport. You're going to show a home up in Eustis, and they're going to have super locks. Every home that you want to go show for a realtor that has an electronic lock outside of our region is going to have a super lock. So you're going to want at least to maintain the super lock key on your phone, which means, hey, thank you, Aura. We're paying $17.55 a month for our new central lock, And in order to have access to all the other homes outside of our area, we're going to pay another $17.55 a month to maintain our super key.
How do you know Oscar was actually waiving off? 'Cause I got off the phone last week with them too. And they were,
Christina Dorr, just
I guess,
they helped her out. So maybe that was a one-off. I don't know. But when I called Oscar at the beginning, they weren't doing it.
they weren't. And I had a conversation about 2 hours ago.
Oh, 2 hours. So they're not doing it.
Before I came in here.
Oh, so they did it for one agent. All right. So West Volusia Association of Realtors, WVAR, is doing it for all our agents. They've opened the doors. They've hired temp help for the next, I think, 30 to 60 days to help transition the flow.
Hey, Allan, it's John.
Yeah.
Oscar is doing it. It's just a procedure that you had to follow. You had to call them. You had to first stop by Aura. You had to deactivate yourself from Aura.
Yes.
And then you had to drive back to Oscar. You had to fill out the same paperwork you did before. They're going to waive everything. You had to provide a credit card and all that same, mumbo.
You have to drive to Oscar. You can't do it online.
I'm sorry?
You have to drive to Oscar. You can't do it online.
They were telling us we had to drive in person. Yes. Because
Well, okay. West Volusia is allowing you to do it online remotely.
Yeah, you can actually, when we talked to them yesterday, because we're going to stop by first in Aura and then go ahead and bring one of the boxes one of the keys that we actually have. Yeah, we talked to the lady. She was very nice. Same thing with Lake and Sumter. They're taking also assisting all the realtors in Central Florida. So you can do that too as well.
Good.
They want your Supra number off your box because some of the boxes are not compatible. I guess they were sold maybe online or whatnot, but
on the black market or whatever.
They're not compatible.
Interesting.
Yes, sir.
Because I have an agent that has their super box outside the district that they've used forever, and I guess recently somebody tried to log into it and didn't have access.
Mm-hmm.
But he has access through his. Oh, okay. We'll keep an eye out on that.
Only brokers can override a box, actually. If any broker.
But
the same areas.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it works.
Yeah, I think what you have to be careful with, you have to reestablish. So, anybody who signed on with Aura at the very beginning and you got your new key and then you went outside of your area and tried to get into a home and it gave you an error, there's another form you have to fill out to make sure that you have access to all the surrounding cooperatives. And so you may have to go through that process again. So just make sure you do that. It's just like you had to do with Aura. Great, my key works in Aura, but it won't work anywhere else unless I fill out this form. Oh, thank you. Why don't you just do that up front? I don't know, but there you go. So make sure that when you are switching over, you ask them, is there another form I have to fill out in order to have access to the boxes in all the cooperatives? And mind you, it's not about having to buy another super box, but it may be you get a central lock for local or remote, but you want to have access to all the listings outside of our region. So that's the big one. And if you have a lockbox, that you bought from a third-party source, the only way you're going to be able to transfer that over or trade it in for a central lock is you have to have it already signed over to you. Or if remember who you purchased it from, they'll give you a form, you'll fill it out, and they'll sign it over to you. And if you can't find them because you bought it on eBay, then you can use it till the battery runs out, and then you just get some new locks.
I have an idea.
Yes, sir.
That will work. I was thinking to keep one Supra box for Lake County or outside of this. Today I went to the training on Central Lock.
Yeah.
And they have, you generate a code. Like if you call me, say, hey, you have a Central Lock in Kissimmee, and my Supra doesn't work on the Central.
Yeah.
So I just go there and say, okay, send me your business card as a realtor, and I send you a code. That code is for 1 hour, 2 hour, whole day, whatever. Why do carry old Supra box and hanging out? And after certain times, they might stop, says, now we're not gonna swap anymore Supra to Central. So
Right.
I think it's a good idea to rid off all the Supra. And if you have a listing in Lake County or Davenport, just tell the realtor.
And that's
Or they could download. They could just download.
fine. And that's fine. You can do that, but you're still going to need your Supra key on your
Supra
phone.
key, you pay $17 a month and
Use it for as long as you need it.
We make a lot of money.
Yep.
$17 is nothing.
Yes.
That's a write-off.
It's a write-off. That's right. So there you go. But if you happen to have, like, we have a lot of agents, including myself, who bought boxes, online or from another source, and they weren't transferred properly. You're not going to be able to trade those in. Just the ones that you can show that you own. All right. I'm going to go take a nap now.
Okay.
And thank you everyone online for showing, and I hope you got a lot out of it. We will
Thanks,
be,
Allan.
we will be, hey, you're very
Thank
welcome.
you. This is great.
Thank you, Allan.
I appreciate
Thank
the
you, Terry.
Thank you, Allan.
Yes. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allan.
It is what it is.
So, so going back, you started saying that you weren't gonna switch one of the Supra?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Monday morning.